All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next of our virtual Better Hearing webinar series. Today, I'm going to be talking about hearing aids and how to know which one is the right one. Today's talk was originally created with contributions from Sarah Burge, who is now a doctor of audiology, was our fourth year doctoral extern a couple years ago, and I created this talk with her. Today, there will also be some contributions from Maria Roa, who is our newest doctoral extern, and you'll be able to meet her next time at our next talk. So we'll get started with some information about our clinic for those who are unfamiliar with us. We are a UNC School of Medicine faculty practice, and as such, we are a nonprofit. We're located in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and we are a practice of 5 doctors of audiology. We are a training clinic for doctoral students who are learning to become audiologists. And we work with all hearing aid models and manufacturers. Since we are a training clinic, we want our students to see every manufacturer and hearing aid that's out there. Our business plan is unbundled. It's a fee-for-service business model. So that means it's a very transparent pricing structure, and we separate out the cost of the services from the cost of the devices. And actually today we'll talk a little bit more about that. We also offer balance and tinnitus specialty testing in addition to our hearing aid services. And we've recently opened a new location in Hillsborough, North Carolina at the Orange County Sportsplex. For appointments, you would call our main number to either be scheduled at our main clinic or at our satellite clinic in Hillsborough. If you're watching this, you're probably already on our YouTube channel, so please subscribe so you can be updated when our new videos are posted every month. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Our Facebook link is down at the bottom there, facebook.com/UNCHCC. We'll be posting information about hearing loss, information about our clinic. We share the links to the live version of these webinars, as well as links to the YouTube videos when they come up. So please go like us on Facebook if you haven't already. So for today's talk, some of our goals is to understand how hearing aids are used to treat hearing loss, who the big 5 hearing aid manufacturers are. We'll talk about the business philosophies behind dispensing hearing aids. We will assess some consumer reports that are out there about hearing aids, and finally learn what is really most important for a hearing aid fitting. I want to start by talking about hearing loss because we really need to understand hearing loss before we can understand how hearing aids help treat hearing loss. Sensorineural is by far the most common type of hearing loss, and sensorineural hearing loss is usually due to a degradation in the hair cells in the inner ear. So as we've learned in elementary and middle school, there's 3 main parts to the ear: the outer, the middle, and the inner ear. And when we talk about the hair cells, we're not talking about the hairs in the ear canal, but rather the hairs in the inner ear. And they're not exactly hairs, they're stereocilia, but we refer to them as hair cells. But they stand up in these little organized rows here, and they detect sound by a movement as sound washes over them. With hearing loss, these hair cells can die, and actually it's the death of these hair cells that causes the hearing loss, because sound comes in and now there's nothing there to detect it. And so the brain doesn't get the information because nothing is detecting it. And this is hearing loss. When we think about hearing loss, there are really 2 parts to it. There's a detection issue, and then there's a processing issue. And detection is what the ear does it detects, do you hear the sound or not? And it sends that sound up to the brain. Processing is extracting meaning from what you hear. And oftentimes a lack of detection will impact the processing. Can't process a sound if you don't hear it. But you can have a deficit in sound processing or auditory processing and have perfectly fine detection of sound. So there are occasions where detection and processing deficits go hand in hand, but there are times where you can have one without the other. Our example below shows people with hearing loss often have a difficult time hearing high frequency speech sounds such as S and SH sounds, or T or K. And so in the example, let's go to the or. Maybe that person's ear doesn't hear or detect the SH or the ST or whatever the sound may be. And so then the brain has to try to guess, well, did they say, let's go to the store? Let's go to the shore? I'm not sure. It's going to guess. Or maybe it just cannot make a guess at all. And then you say, oh, I didn't hear that. Can you please repeat? And that's what happens with hearing loss. So hearing loss affects us by compromising our speech perception, which results in a lot of effort to try to just listen and communicate. And when you are making a lot of effort to just listen, it gets very tiring over time, and it can cause you to start to withdraw if you're working too hard, which means reduced social engagement, which then can lead to loneliness and sometimes depression. All of this has correlations with cognitive decline, physical decline, and poor quality of life. So these are things we want to avoid, and it's why treating hearing loss is so, so important. So how do hearing aids help with all of that? Well, hearing aids essentially make sounds louder. When we're making sounds louder, think about that hair cell diagram where there are missing patches of hair cells detecting sound. When a sound is louder, it's a bigger sound wave. And so neighboring hair cells can now detect the sound and send it to the brain. And so we get better detection of sound. Hearing aids also help filter sound and reduce noise. And because they're separating out the speech from the noise, it makes it easier to process that speech. So makes it easier on the brain for both detection and processing. So now that we have a foundation for hearing loss, how hearing aids help, what they're doing in the ears, let's get into what you're probably watching this for and to talk about different hearing aids and manufacturers. So there are lots of models out there. There are lots of manufacturers. There are lots of styles. Within the same style, manufacturer, model, the level of advancement or the tier of technology of the computer chip might be different. So how do you know which one is the right one? Let's talk about first who dispenses hearing aids. And there are two types of providers who are legally qualified to fit hearing aids. One provider is a doctor of audiology. They hold a doctorate level degree. They pass a state licensing exam, and they're considered a healthcare provider. Hearing instrument specialists have a high school diploma. They do go through certificate training programs and an apprenticeship and have to pass a state licensing exam, but it's not the same level of training as a doctor of audiology, and they're not considered healthcare providers. They can also only work with adults. They cannot work with children, and they cannot work with special needs adults. There are different scopes of practice between an audiologist and a hearing instrument specialist. And if you want to pause the video, you're welcome to read these. So how do hearing aids get dispensed? How do they get paid for? Well, there's two main business models, and typically with hearing instrument specialists, they're usually working in a retail chain, and even some audiologists might be working in a retail or private practice. Those types of practices tend to fit hearing aids with a bundled model, meaning that you see one price and that's the only price you see, and then you get quote unquote free services for the life of the hearing aid. You don't have to pay anything when you come back. Well, you are paying something. You've just prepaid for all the services that you haven't used yet. Unbundled business models is the opposite of that. You pay for services as you use them. As consumers, we've been kind of conditioned that bundling is better, right? You see ads about bundling all over the place, that you'll get a better deal if you bundle in your services all together. Well, with hearing aids, that thought process doesn't necessarily apply. Are you a consumer or are you a patient? And what kind of practice are you at? If it were me with hearing loss, I'd want to be treated more like a patient because it is a medical condition. And the hearing aid is just a tool to help treat that medical condition. In the long run, unbundling leads to more transparent billing. It lowers costs over time as well for most people. Most people are not spending $2,000 to $3,000 or more on services for the 5 years that they may have their hearing aids. You come in a couple times a year for cleaning, that doesn't cost a few $100s to do that. Unbundling also means the entry cost to getting hearing aids is lower because you're not paying up front for services for life. And so it can bring the cost up front down by a few $1,000s for many people. And it also allows the patient to understand the value for each service that's provided. Because when the audiologist advertises, oh, you get free services for life, it really devalues the profession and it devalues all of the work that goes into supporting a patient who has hearing loss. I can't speak for other practices, but I can say at our practice, the average cost of a single hearing aid is about $1,500. Most people get 2, and then there are service fees that are charged on top of that. But to give people an idea of how much a hearing aid costs, there's a big range. There are basic hearing aids and there are very advanced hearing aids. And so our range is somewhere between $350 to about $2,400 per hearing aid. But it's why you need to know which model is right for you and how can you find that out? Because you don't want to pay $2,400 per hearing aid if you don't need a hearing aid with all the bells and whistles, right? So let's talk about that some more. So what hearing aids are out there? There are thousands of hearing aids out there, and it's a confusing market because the same hearing aid might have different brand names stamped on the outside of it. But in the end, it's the same hearing aid. And this chart shows the parent company of some various hearing aid manufacturers. And then it shows all of the subsidiary companies that live underneath that brand. So there's some brands you might recognize here. Phonak and Oticon are 2 very well-known brands of hearing aids. Signia, which used to be Siemens, and Rexton. These are essentially the same hearing aid. The software looks the same from my end. The hearing aids look the same. They sound the same, function the same, but yet they're stamped with different names. There used to be 6 major manufacturers of hearing aids, and they were termed the Big 6. Signia and Widex merged in 2019, and they are now WS Audiology. So the Big 6 has become the Big 5. And the Big 5 control 80% of the world's hearing aid market, with Sonova, the parent company of Phonak and Unitron, controlling the majority of that, with WS Audiology now in a close second. So huge market share. They're international companies, and they have a lot of models underneath their brands. So let's talk about these a little bit more. We'll start with Sonova. They're a Swiss company. Phonak and Unitron are 2 hearing aids that we fit here quite a lot at the UNC Hearing and Communication Center. And I've got a picture of both of these. These are kind of their main brands. Phonak's a bigger company, more widely fit than Unitron is, but you'll notice their charger looks the same. If you wear a Phonak hearing aid, you'll notice that Unitron hearing aid looks very similar to my Phonak hearing aid. And it's because they're sister companies. Sonova is also the company that makes Advanced Bionics, which is a cochlear implant company. William Demant is the parent company of Oticon and Bernafon. These are also brands that we work with. So these are all the smaller brands. They also make Philips items. The hearing aids software might be different, but the parts are all the same. They're manufactured in the same plant. For all intents and purposes, they're really about the same hearing aid. GN Group is the parent company of Resound. Belltone is the retail version of Resound. So Resound hearing aids can be fit by anyone who's legally able to fit and dispense a hearing aid. Belltone is the retail store that you can buy a Belltone hearing aid at. But a Belltone hearing aid is a Resound hearing aid. It just stamped with the Belltone name, and Belltone fits and dispenses it. GN Group was the first made for iPhone hearing aid back in 2013 with their Resound Lynx product. And GN also manufactures the very popular Jabra earbuds. A lot of people have heard of those. WS Audiology, previously Widex and Signia were separate groups, and now they've merged. Rexton is also a big brand name that a lot of people may recognize. A few years ago, Rexton was contracted with Costco to be the Kirkland Signature brand, but it was a Rexton hearing aid with Kirkland Signature stamped on it. But Rexton hearing aids look just like Signia hearing aids. And so it's just funny. We get hearing aids in the clinic here. People come in with hearing aids from other places all the time. And I'm holding a hearing aid that says Kirkland Signature on it. And it looks just like a Signia hearing aid that I fit. So yeah. WS Audiology has all of these brands underneath them, and Widex, Signia, Rexton. Starkey Hearing Technologies makes Starkey hearing aids, and they're also the manufacturer of Audibel. Audibel is essentially Starkey hearing aids. That's the retail office, and they stamp the name Audibel on top of this Starkey hearing aid. They're the only American hearing aid company. They were founded in the 60s as a hearing aid repair shop. And shortly after that, they started manufacturing their own devices. Starkey is known for their innovations with custom ear molds and custom hearing aids. And they're really a company that is known for innovations in the hearing world. The hearing aid world, rather. So far we've talked about who are the people that dispense hearing aids, how are hearing aid dispensed, so unbundled versus a bundled model. And we've talked about some of the major manufacturers and brands of hearing aids. So we're going to take a dive into styles, models, and tiers of technology next. So when we think about how advanced the hearing aid is, it's not, and really that's what drives the cost, right? How smart is the hearing aid? It's not, is it teeny tiny or is it really big? The same or different styles of hearing aids, really big or really little, might have the same little computer chip inside them. And it's really that chip that controls how advanced it is. When we think about what tier versus what is the price or how advanced it is, you see charts like this all the time where you have your premium technology, and then you have your basic, and they tell you, oh, you know, you move up in technology and you get more and more features. And this is what this graph tells you. And okay, that's nice. But what does that actually tell me about how the hearing aid's functioning? Not really much. So you see another chart that looks like this, and you might go in for a consultation with someone and they say, oh yeah, you know, I have an active lifestyle. I am in cars and planes a lot. I'm going to dinners. Maybe they work as a consultant and they're taking clients to dinner, and oh, you're in busy environments, a lot of noise. You should get the premium because look at all of these things that apply to you, all of these listening environments. And while that's true, it's not the end all be all necessarily, but you will see providers using charts like this a lot to tie a tier of hearing aid to your lifestyle and how active it is, how dynamic it is. And this is another chart of the same style. So different tiers of technology, lower tier, higher tier, what they call a pro level from this manufacturer. And you're looking at, oh, are you going shopping? Okay, one of these 3 tiers you need to hear in the grocery store. Oh, but you listen to music, you should get a higher tier one. Well, maybe, maybe not. There's more to it. Again, another chart of the same form where, okay, you have one-on-one conversations, basic, mid-range, premium technology. Maybe you're having trouble in church. Well, you really need the premium. Well, do you? This kind of chart is what's really more informative from an audiologist standpoint, and it tells you more of what is that actual hearing aid doing. So when people come to see me for a consultation about hearing aids, yes, I take into account their lifestyle, but what is the hearing aid actually doing in the most advanced tier versus the one right under it that makes it better for that noisy environment? And does that person need that help? What if their brain is really good at processing speech and background noise? They just need sounds to be loud enough so that the detection, so that the sound goes to the brain. Even though they're in a busy lifestyle, they may not need a top of the line hearing aid. So while lifestyle is really important, it's not the end all be all for which tier you need. And this is an example of a chart from Unitron that we use as a feature breakdown. So they have their top of the line model, next, and then their most basic model. And it tells us, well, what are some of the different environments that the hearing aid is detecting and switching in and out of automatically? And if someone's not really in a lot of background noise, they might just need a hearing aid that detects regular conversation, maybe with a little bit of noise, but otherwise they don't need to detect music or louder levels of noise. How good is it at reducing background noise? Does it have dynamic noise reduction? And here the top 2 tiers have it. So maybe the top of the line they wouldn't necessarily need, or maybe they would. Maybe they have a terrible time hearing in noise, and even the slightest amount of background noise really inhibits their speech understanding. And then maybe we do need a top of the line model. And so it's important to test that, right? So a lot of places don't test your ability to repeat sentences or words in background noise. And here we do that with every consultation for hearing aids because it's really, really helpful for knowing, well, which tier is most appropriate. Another thing that we look at with deciding, well, which tier do we want to go with in a different manufacturers, how many channels does the hearing aid have? And channels refer to the spread of frequencies. So there's low frequency and then there's high frequency sounds, right? So as you go across, people's hearing loss might change from low frequency to high frequency. Generally, people have more hearing loss in the high frequency range. And so you need more amplification in the high frequencies. Well, if their hearing loss changes very drastically from very good hearing to very severe hearing loss, you need a lot of channels so you can be really specific with how much amplification you're prescribing to each frequency range. And so the more channels, the more precise it is. For someone with a flat hearing loss, meaning their hearing loss is the same in low and high frequency, they may not need a lot of channels because you can increase this larger band altogether. And for their hearing, it's still going to be pretty precise. Typically, the higher levels of technology have more channels. For a sloping hearing loss, that's better. For a flat hearing loss, may not be necessary. There are lots of different hearing aid features, more than just noise reduction, that vary by tier. And these are things that your audiologist takes into consideration when recommending a hearing aid and when recommending which tier. Across all manufacturers, they have between 3 and 5 tiers or levels of technology. And every manufacturer's tier is different. The top of the line for one may have different features from the top of the line to from the other. So it's not necessarily an apples to apples comparison. And your audiologist is constantly being trained on new products and being updated. And we know which features are available in every model and every tier. And it's not something that I'd ever expect a patient to learn. Because it takes a 4-year doctoral education plus continuing education every year and constant trainings when new products are released to know what's available in what company. So your audiologist is really a valuable tool for you because we understand what features are most important for your lifestyle and for your listening needs. And that way we can recommend the tier that is truly most appropriate and not over or under recommend. Every manufacturer is different. And in some cases, some manufacturers' second tier might be better than another manufacturer's top of the line. And new computer chips, new products, new models are constantly being released. Some manufacturers' newest product might be 1.5 years old by now. Another manufacturers might have just come out. So their second tier might even be a little bit better and have different features from the other. And so there's just constantly things coming out and more to learn. Even within the same manufacturer, just to add more confusion on top of confusion, 2 different models can seem equivalent, but they're actually different. So I'll give you an example. So Phonak is a very widely known brand, and we work with Phonak here. And there's a Costco version for Phonak, and the model is called the Phonak Brio. And very similar to the Phonak Audio, which a lot of my patients wear and we fit a lot of. But when you actually connect the Brio to the software, and which we've done, I've had a patient come in with Phonak Brio hearing aids from Costco. The features are much reduced. Even though the outside looks brand new, oh, it's a rechargeable hearing aid. It has a telecoil, it connects with Bluetooth, but all of those other features that are important for your hearing abilities may have been taken away. And so an audiologist would consider, oh, well, this is kind of a basic hearing aid. Not to say it's basic by any means, it's still quite advanced, but compared to all of the tiers that are available, it may not be as advanced as they let on. And, it makes sense that it's sold for a lower cost then because it has reduced features. And of course, Costco can buy in bulk, so it's easy for them to sell at a reduced cost. On that note, I mentioned earlier that Rexton used to be contracted with Costco as their Kirkland signature brand, and now Phonak has taken that contract. Costco changes it every few years. And their newest model is a Phonak, looks like a Unitron or a Phonak hearing aid, right? It has Bluetooth, just like the new Phonak and Unitron hearing aids do, has telecoil, sold at a lower cost. But what they don't tell you is that it may have some reduced features, actually, that things that go on in the background that, are not marketed as much as the Bluetooth and the rechargeable are. So I see people come in with these, and I think Costco is a wonderful resource, and I don't want to knock them at all. They certainly make hearing aids more accessible. But you want to know what you're getting, and it's not necessarily an apples to apples comparison of Phonak to Phonak when it comes to hearing aids being rebranded. On that note of comparisons, let's talk about consumer reviews a little bit. Consumer reviews are really, really important for any industry. But we do need to be skeptical when it comes to hearing aids, because as we found already going through this talk, it's a confusing market. Not all hearing aids are created equally. And even within a brand, they're not the same. That person's hearing loss varies from person to person. Their processing and cognitive abilities vary. And the way devices are programmed varies greatly. So even a very basic hearing aid, an entry level, if you will, hearing aid that's fit properly with real ear measures, I can probably make work better than a premium device that has not been fit with real ear measures, and it's just computers used to estimate the output of the hearing aid. So with the consumer reviews, there's no J.D. Power's ranking list for hearing aids, unfortunately. But in 2018, this big consumer report came out, and it was kind of groundbreaking at the time. And I think every audiologist probably knows about it. But it's from consumerreports.org. And they surveyed over 17,000 of their subscribers about hearing aid brands. And they had people rank them on a point system. And the criteria was the what's on the screen in front of you, battery life, value, how reliable is it, how does it fit, how's the sound clarity, etc. And so they came up with a list for these 16 brands, and because some of them were tied for points, they had 1st through 8th place. Now, when you actually look at the point spread, statistically speaking, the point spread was pretty small, which meant that all of the hearing aids that were ranked 1st through 4th place were essentially tied for 1st place. And the hearing aids ranked 5th through 8th were essentially tied for 2nd place. So something to keep in mind there. But was it a good survey? Did it really show, oh, Kirkland Signature is the #1 hearing aid, and that's it? Everyone goes to Costco for their Kirkland Signature hearing aid because it's the best hearing aid. Well, if you look closely at the list, you may have noticed that there are some hearing aid brands on there that I remember are actually the same hearing aid. They just have a different name stamped on the outside of them, like Resound and Belltone. Now, Resound can be fit by a lot of people, including a Belltone. Belltone is fit by Belltone. But why is the same device ranked both at the top of the list and at the very bottom? You might notice this also. I mentioned Kirkland Signature in 2018 was a Rexton hearing aid. You'll notice Kirkland Signature and Rexton and Signia all have different numbers of points. So how is that when they're the same hearing aid, essentially? Savantos makes all of those. It's because the way hearing aids fit vary physically on the ear, the way they're programmed varies, the providers, that their follow-up support, their expertise the hearing loss of that person, all of this varies. It is so challenging to rank hearing aids just on device alone, because that's not all that matters with having a successful hearing aid fitting. So I say all that just to say, be skeptical of consumer reviews. I think it's wonderful that we have an attempt to rank the different brands, and it does put hearing care in the public's eye, but it's almost impossible to compare technology to technology. Everyone's needs and wants are different. So in the end, it's really less about the brand and more about how knowledgeable and thorough your hearing care provider is. And it's why it's important to find someone who is going to help support you and is knowledgeable about hearing aids. There's no one size fits all hearing aid. There are a lot of factors that determine if a hearing aid is going to work for you. And the most important aspect, I would say, because not every provider does it, is having the hearing aid fit with real ear measures. And this is where someone puts a little microphone in your ear, you listen to a passage of speech, and they take a recording with the hearing aid on to see what is the output. How is every frequency being amplified? And that allows us then to make adjustments to make sure every frequency is loud enough to be heard, but not too loud to be uncomfortable. Only about 30% of doctors of audiology run that measurement. Most offices that you will go to fit hearing aids just use a computer to estimate the output. And then they ask you, how does it sound? And it's not that I never ask my patients, how does it sound? Because that's obviously extremely important, but you need the objective measurement as well. Having a hearing aid fit physically well in your ear is also really important. If a hearing aid's uncomfortable, you're probably not going to be happy with it and not going to want to wear it. Does it also have the necessary advanced features that you might need for your hearing loss? Does it fit your lifestyle and your listening goals? And does it have the special features that you want? If having a rechargeable hearing aid is more convenient, you should have a hearing aid that is rechargeable. You probably won't be happy with changing batteries every day, and you won't be satisfied with that hearing aid. And our last point at the bottom there is also extremely important. Does your audiologist or your hearing care provider provide you with the proper follow-up support and services and counseling that you need to be successful with your hearing aid? Because wearing hearing aids is a therapy process. We're retraining the ears and the brain what different sounds sound like. And that takes time. And you need someone who's going to be with you on that journey. No one's ever had a perfect hearing aid fitting from day one. It's always a therapy process that we spend a few weeks going through. Occasionally we'll get one that they come back for their follow-up and say, everything was great. I don't want any changes. I'm doing well. But that's pretty rare. So you need someone who's going to be there with you and have an open door to remind you if something is wrong, please come in and see me, because we need to figure out why it's wrong, what's keeping you from wearing it, and find a solution. Hearing aids need to be verified, and this is a picture of one of our patients that he allowed us to photograph him a few years ago, going through this real ear measures process. And it's an objective measurement, and it's the best practice standard for fitting hearing aids. So there's the image of the little microphone going in his ear, and then we can see the output of the hearing aid on this screen. Sound booth testing is good for validation, and I use it sometimes with patients for speech testing to see, well, how much is the hearing aid helping you understand speech compared to not? But it's not best practice to verify it. So we won't fit hearing aids on someone for the first time and put them right in the booth. It's usually after wearing it a few weeks, you've gotten a chance to adapt to it. We've also run this objective real ear measurement, and then we might do some speech testing. Outcome questionnaires are a form of subjective validation of hearing aid fittings, and there's a list of some questionnaires that have been developed. And it's really best practice to use a combination of these measures through the hearing process. So ask your providers if they use hearing aid verification, if they validate hearing aid fittings, and make sure they're doing it. And for the provider, again, it's very important. So I'll say it again. Remember not to put so much emphasis on the device. It's your hearing care provider that is really going to help you be successful with the hearing aid, no matter which brand it is. An initial fitting and adaptation period happens over about 6 weeks. And then you do need to come back about every 6 to 12 months for follow-ups, for cleaning and maintenance, because they're devices that live on your body. And they pick up wax, they pick up skin, they pick up dust and debris and moisture from the air. They need to be cleaned periodically. And that's what we're here for. I've said already, and I'll say again, that wearing hearing aids is a therapy process. And as doctors of audiology, we're really therapists for your brain, because hearing aids are providing access to missing sounds, but we really need to retrain your brain to detect and make sense and process these sounds. And with that said, full-time use of hearing aids every day is essential to success with hearing aids. About the worst thing I see is my patients who wear hearing aids situationally, and they never get a chance to really adapt and settle into the sound from hearing aids. And usually that means they think it's too loud every time they put them on. And it's unfortunate to see that, because you really need to wear them every day to adapt to them. So in summary, the device is part of a hearing aid fitting, of course, but the service is arguably a more important aspect of it. Ask your provider if they are an unbundled or bundled clinic. Ask if they use real-ear measures. And we didn't talk about locked devices too much, but retail chains will often lock their hearing aids so that no one else can work on them. So ask if they lock or unlock their hearing aids, because if you're not happy with that provider, you want to be able to go somewhere else and take your hearing aids with you and have them worked on too. Your audiologist is your ally. We are your friend. We are trying to help, support you, and help you make an informed and educated decision about your hearing aids. And again, it's not just about the hearing aids, but there are other ways to improve communication. A hearing aid is just one of our tools to do it. And lastly, if you're dissatisfied with your current hearing aids, discuss what's wrong. Discuss why you're not happy. What's keeping you from wearing them all day, every day with your current provider, or see someone else for a second opinion. Our next talk will be on hearing loss and cognitive decline. It will be live on Wednesday, July 7th at 4, and an email link will be posted. Will be emailed to our patients, and it'll be posted to our Facebook page, facebook.com/UNCHCC, about a week before the actual talk. And it will be posted on YouTube a few days to a week after the live session. So thank you for coming. Please hit the subscribe button at the bottom and like this video if you found it helpful. And if you want to schedule an appointment or reach out to me specifically for questions, my email is written there in front of you, and our phone number is there as well.